Hi, a quick reminder where we left off. We had derived six forms of samskarta with Anunāsika, and we didn't write all of them out, but we know that there are an equivalent six forms just like this of samskarta with Anusvara. And I have been letting you know that the next step is the doubling of Anusvara. And that is something that puzzled me greatly. So I have undertaken to learn more about Anusvara. Now, most of what we do today is going to be me sharing things that I have learned or found about Anusvara. And they're going to all be in the notes. So it's just a listening and thinking about that sort of day. Now, I realized pretty early on that my understanding of Anusvara was very simplistic. And in fact, mostly I wondered exactly how I was supposed to pronounce it. And yeah, thinking sort of ish, but also knowing what we learned from our discussion of Tanani, that it was Nasika Anusvarasya. So the sole place of articulation of Anusvara is Nasika, and that is a kind of a puzzle. How does that work? Much less how do you double that sound? So I don't know exactly why. I have seven Sanskrit grammars that I've accumulated over time out of curiosity, I guess. Maybe hoping more will seep in each time. But what stands out is that most of these grammars, which include um, Kale and Bandakar and Whitney and Macdonell and others, have very, very little to say about Anusvara, very little. And often it's put in one little paragraph along with Anunāsika, and not much else is said about it. And in one, and I'm going to quote one because it is so completely discombobulated and that it sort of is a cautionary lesson to be careful what we take as the answer to things. Um, it also reminds me when Prabhakara Shastri told me that when I learned Ashtadhyayi, nobody could contradict me. Well, that may be true, but I think the day that I can say I have learned Ashtadhyayi has not yet arrived. But there are some parts of it which I have at least a basic understanding of. So that comes into play in this. I will read you the what this one grammar published by a British university press. I don't want to say any more than that. Um, and then I'm leaving out a few bits of this, but this is Visarga and Anusvāra. Huh. The Visarga is often pronounced similar to ch in German Bach or Scottish loch. Okay, often pronounced similar to ch in German Bach or Scottish loch, but slightly weaker. You may also hear it pronounced like a standard ha, with a weak repetition of the preceding vowel, making naraha, naraha. The anusvara is not a sound of its own, but nasalizes the preceding vowel, making sound approximately like French grand. Well, that is confused in so many ways. I don't know where to start. But what really knocks me out is that he is conveying the idea that pronouncing Visarga aha versus ach is a matter of preference or regional variation. And this one we can really dispense with easily because we are going to come up to one of my favorite sutras, Kupvo ach kaf paucha. Kupvo ach kaf paucha, when uh, the optional usage of jikmabula is explicitly, and upadmania are explicitly described. So that's just an example of how far off the Sanskrit grammars can be in terms of helping us with Anusvara. Now, the only one of all these grammars that had enough useful to say was Macdonell, and that's not really fair because when we get to our more serious discussion, it will all come from Macdonell's Vedic grammar. And that's the answer. That's the first thing that I've recognized, which is that Anusvara in Sanskrit, what we call Sanskrit, is a shadow. It's kind of an orphan uh, of what it is in the Veda. Now, again, I am embarrassed because I imagine that a number of you have studied or learned Veda, and this will not come as any surprise. But uh, we need to look at this today because that's the only way we can get our double anusvara is from Veda and Vedic usage. So I'm going to share with you some of the passages from Macdonell's Vedic grammar that I find particularly helpful in understanding more about this interesting. It's akshara, really. No, so that's the first question. What is it? And as I said before, at least in Sanskrit, we know that these are different because there's a sanya for Anunāsika, Mukhanāsika, Vachanonunāsika. That's what Anunāsika is. However, Parnini doesn't define Anusvara and doesn't really have very much to say about it. We will come up to Manusvaraha and a few sutras, Sandhi sutras relative to it. But let's see what the Anusvara was in olden times. And these are all taken from Macdonell's. I had to go to Google to find out how to pronounce Macdonell. This is from page 10. And again, this is all in the notes. Distinct from the 5 class nasals in the pure is the pure nasal. Now that's a term that does come up in a couple of the grammars, but not many. The pure nasal, variously called Anusvāra and Anunāsika. Now it sounds as though he's confusing them or saying they're the same thing, but he's not, and that becomes clear. Which always follows a vowel and is formed by the breath passing through the nose, unmodified by the influence of any consonant. So he's saying both Anusvara and Anunāsika are pure nasals. The former is usually written with a dot before consonants and the latter, whatever, before vowels. The proper use of anusvara is not before mutes, but before sibilants and h, which have no nasal class, which have no class nasals. So this is a point that emerges in Macdonell. We'll come back to this in a moment. So the most proper use is before sibilants and h. Now, in our example, what we're working of, some skarta, it is coming before the sibilant s. When final, anusvara usually represents sometimes Medially, anusvara regularly appears before sibilants and h. It usually appears before s, where it always represents or n. When anusvara appears before sh or h, it represents the corresponding nasal. And now on page 17 of Macdonell, the class, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The class nasals are produced with organs of speech in the same position as for the corresponding as for the formation of the corresponding mutes while the breath passes through the nose. So my guess is to start out with, based really on Stanani, is pretty close to true. The pure nasal, when called Anunāsika, combines with the preceding vowel to form, and this is the big deal here, a single sound, a nasalized vowel, as in the French bon. When called Anusvāra, after sound, it forms in combination with the preceding vowel two successive sounds. Who knew? Two successive sounds, a pure vowel immediately followed by the pure nasal, though seeming to form a single sound, as in the English bang, bang, where, however, the nasal is guttural, not pure. Bang, bang. It's almost a kind of analogy to a diphthong. So that is something I had never heard before. Bang. And that's going to come into play when we talk about doubling next time. Now, one other interesting point is that this is a footnote on page 33 of Macdonell. Anusvara seems to have been used originally before sibilants and h only. Compounds like submerge show that originally remained unchanged before So that's kind of interesting. As is another little bit, the Taittiriya Pratishakya allows the optional use of anusvara before semivowels. So that's where we that's our starting point for our discussion of doubling of anusvara. And uh, okay.